All right, today it's my pleasure to welcome Jason Lange, host of the Evolutionary Men podcast. He's a certified Robert Glover, no Mr. Nice Guy coach. He's running men's retreats and dealing with relationships and well, Jason, would you like to introduce yourself, buddy?
Yeah, stoked to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm a men's group facilitator and guide. So I support men in relationships, purpose, work, vitality, you name it these days. 'Cause a lot of men need support.
Yeah,
And I think the tide is turning in terms of guys really opening up to getting some help.
right on, right on. So what kind of got you started on this men's healing journey that you're on and helping guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Unsurprisingly, it comes from my own journey. So I had tried a bunch of stuff, but in my mid-20s, got pretty lucky in that I got exposed to a men's group and joined my first men's group. And it radically altered the trajectory of my life in terms of, I've done therapies, plant medicines, all kinds of transformational stuff, and they all help.
Yeah,
But being part of a long-term men's group has been the thing that has tipped the scales, so to speak,
right
in my
on.
life in the most impactful way. So
Nice.
I was doing it so much for myself that I just kept talking about it, and guys started asking me about it. And then at one point I was like, well, okay, let me try leading some stuff for some other guys.
Absolutely. So what was your first men's group that you kind of got set up with, and how did that kind of come about for you?
Yeah, I was working for a nonprofit at the time. Some of the guys that were just in that company with me, and we had heard about them, and we were like, yeah, let's give this a try. And we started meeting, and we had met another man who was actually kind of a men's coach, and he had been in groups before. So he initially led our group and really kind of took us deeper in terms
Nice.
of, okay, there's a lot here that isn't just sitting around talking about day-to-day stuff, but we can go into a deeper place, and that's where the magic often happens.
Nice, man. So you guys basically started your own group out of thin air. That's impressive. I mean, it's nice to have a group of like-minded guys who are willing to do that. I'm starting to grab people like that, and we've talked about doing stuff like that. So you're also, what caught my attention was your certified Robert Glover, no Mr. Nice Guy coach. And
Yeah.
I've met Robert. He's a interesting dude. Love him, and I'm hoping to have him on at some point. What's that entail?
Yeah, so I actually first met him through men's work. We were in a men's program together. He walks his walk in terms of
Yeah.
telling guys they need male community. He does the same for himself. And so we were in a little men's group together as part of a program. I started to get to know him and was kind of very impressed, to say the least. I had read his book previously and then kind of decided to go down the path of becoming one of his certified coaches and did a training with him. And he's a good friend and mentor of mine these days and has
Right on.
supported me tremendously in my personal life and my life as a man coaching other men. And I would say probably more than you might see this too, probably more than anything else, No More Mr. Nice Guy is kind of the book that often blows guys' minds in terms of, oh, wow, there's a lot of things I just wasn't aware of in terms of how I'm showing up in my world and how I can start to get a lot more of what I want and say no to the things I don't want.
Yeah, he's such a great guy. So, what you're running kind of in-person groups and hybrid groups? How do people kind of find you and get started on your journey? And then what does it entail?
Yeah, I work with guys in a couple different ways, and most men I end up working with come through avenues like this. One thing I found is men love podcasts. So, getting out there, having my own podcast. I'm on one of my coaching partners' podcasts quite a bit, and that kind of draws guys in. But the trajectory of men that I work with tends to be something bad happens in life. Just like they hit some kind of roadblock. Either a partner leaves them, it's the end of a relationship, a divorce, it's some kind of health crisis, it's losing a job, but there's something that's acutely painful in their lives that for the first time ever, they realize like, wow, I need some support. I don't know how to deal with this. And it's often then and only then that men will kind of start to come my way. Not always, but that's often the thing that does it. The primary ways I work with men these days are I do one online group all about dating and relationships. So it's about guys who want to learn to lead in their relationships, whether they're an existing one or they're still trying to meet their partner, in this kind of new way that, as we kind of joke, is beyond the kind of macho, bravado kind of dude, and also beyond the nice guy. So what does it mean to be a guy that has access to our balls in our heart is really what it comes down to, right? We can be firm with our boundaries, clear with our desire, and still open, still sensitive, still attuned. And that training is just training that most of us never got. And so a lot of men come and just learn some basic tools for how to generate attraction in relationships and how to primarily navigate conflict. It's a huge one in terms of guys I work with. Most men I know were raised in households where they never had modeled for them what healthy conflict between partners looks like and how we can rupture and repair. And then that's a virtual program. And then I also do a hybrid program that's specifically around shadow work. So this idea of guys getting more in touch with often unconscious parts of their body mind, their emotional selves, their mental selves. And shadow work is often what drives the things that keep coming up in our lives that we don't understand. Like, why do I keep doing this thing? I know I don't want to. I know it's not good for me. Or I keep attracting the same kind of partner over and over. And so I lead shadow work men's groups that are about guys really going deep into the roots of what's often operating them without them realizing it. That works so deep, we do the hybrid. So guys get to know each other in a group online for about 6 weeks. And then we just did the fall retreat a couple weeks ago. And then we go about 4 days in a super deep retreat. And because there's been some trust built, men can go places they've often just never gone before, like things they've held, emotions they've never experienced, finally start to release. And I love that work so much because on the other end of it is always so much more vitality. It's just like seeing men come alive in their bodies. Just so inspiring. And then I lead one-off retreats where guys come out throughout the week for the weekend for a super deep dive over Labor Day and stuff. And I coach guys. So, but primarily I'm kind of always trying to get guys into men's groups, whether it's one I'm leading or whether it's one of the many around them or it's having them create their own.
So what is shadow work? I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but kind of what is that? I've never heard the term shadow work before.
Yeah, shadow work's basically the idea of anything we're not aware of in our awareness, in our consciousness, really, that tends to impact how we behave. And so, just some gross generalizations here would be, I see this a lot actually with so-called nice guys I work with that are really longing to be with a partner. They really want to be in a relationship. And they'll be super nice. They will do all the classic nice guy stuff of just trying to appease their partner. And oftentimes they will come across as needy. So their partners won't be attracted to them because they can feel this guy needs something from me. He's like not okay unless I'm telling him he's okay. Basically, like unless I'm giving him approval. And just as one example, obviously it's far more nuanced on an individual man's level, but oftentimes that will have roots right back down to our primary attachments with our parents when we were raised, of what were we getting and what were we not getting. As we do the shadow work, it's kind of hard to describe, but it's like time travel in our body. And we go back to the place the emotion got stuck, whether that was overwhelming grief, overwhelming anger, overwhelming fear, and we allow that emotion that was too overwhelming for our nervous system at whatever age to come through. And it actually brings it to completion. And that's where there's this huge release, and where these emotions that will often drive our behavior without us realizing it, that's kind of the magic of shadow work. So what we're trying to do is bring things from the unconscious into conscious awareness. The ways we push away love, the ways we push away anger, the ways we get reactive. It's totally different for each man. It's part of what's so fun about leading the work is we never have any idea. Rarely do the men as well when we go into our process of what's going to come forward, Guys will surface memories they haven't thought about in years. Their bodies will have reactions to things. I was working with one guy about 6 years ago. We were doing some deep shadow work and kind of had him on a mat, and his arm like shot up, left above his head, and he just started screaming in pain and like just total agony. And I'm kind of working with him in it. And he has these visceral memories suddenly flood back that he had not remembered from being a kid raised in a pretty intense Catholic school. And the nuns, they would actually grab their arms physically and yank him up whenever he'd be punished. And his body remembered. It just remembered the trauma of being like a 5-year-old boy and being heavily disciplined for things that often weren't quite appropriate for him to be disciplined for. And the energy that came through that was so much fear, so much anger, and so much grief. And as that processed, it was like his nervous system became just more settled and solid on the other side, as one example. So it's hard to share exactly what it'll be because it's different for each guy.
Sure. So what kind of, I don't know if you call them modalities or whatever, are you using breath work, medication, just talk therapy, any,
yeah,
I don't want to get into
a combination.
Any, psychedelics, or if you're using any of that stuff, or I don't even know where your retreat
we
is,
don't for this process. The shadow work process is totally sober, and it's a combination. It's a pretty intuitive process that's kind of a combination of like some somatic experiencing, some internal family systems, some somatic body work. Sometimes we'll actually be doing body work on guys. And honestly, most important, more than anything else, it's going to sound a little woo-woo, but it's an extremely tight, safe container of just deep presence and love. So I have many men that come through this work that have literally never had anyone be fully present with them without anything attached to it. Meaning I'm not needing anything from you right now. And then we just, from that place, explore. We go into the guy's state. What are you feeling in your body? Where are you feeling it? And the body almost always knows once we're guided, and we use some different tools to guide men deeper in. And that's when things will start to unlock. And, for better or worse, I've been doing this for about 7 years now, but I've been in it since my 20s. There's only so many patterns of how we kind of get messed up as humans. And there's some pretty deep themes often that, again, not always, but tend to have roots back to how we were raised. And man, I'll tell you, one of the most humbling things about this work has been how brutal a childhood many men have had. I mean, just brutal. The stuff I've heard and seen come through men's nervous systems of like things that guys have sometimes been carrying for decades. Like we're talking guys in their 50s, 60s, 70s, things they've been holding their whole lives that finally get to come through. And it just blows my mind every time I see a man courageous enough to step right into that.
Yeah, I've experienced that with ayahuasca. I've never done a men's retreat, but I've had people very close to me and been in groups where the sheer pain coming from these guys, a lifetime of trauma these guys carry with them. I mean, it literally gives me chills just talking about it. It's freaking disgusting how some of these poor kids are treated and raised, and that especially men have no outlet. At least they don't think they have an outlet. It's so hard to find a community or a group. And I've talked to people that it's like, I don't know if I'm just that guy where people want to tell me stuff, but it's like, dudes I've known for 30 years or 10 years, worked with them, and all of a sudden one day it's like, yeah, man, I was, abused as a child, and I've never told anybody this. And it's like, you've been carrying the shit around. You've never had any therapy or anything, and they just hold it in, and it makes them act out, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, it has a huge cost. This is part of what's got me so fired up about the shadow work, right? As I say, as humans, but particularly as men, it's like we come into the world with a battery that's got a certain amount of chi on it. And when we're in our like teens and 20s, we just push through things. We're working hard. Maybe we're partying hard. We're working out all the time. And once the mid 30s hit in particular, and then definitely by the mid 40s, that battery isn't automatically charged anymore. Mm-hmm. And our kind of energetic debt will catch up to us, and men will start to have autoimmune disorders. Their bodies will start to fall apart. They'll have mental and emotional challenges. And a lot of this can be, it's not as simple as it's just shadow, but it's like accelerated by how much unprocessed shadow we have. Because you can think about it this way, right? I mean, we've probably all witnessed this at some point, but you imagine you're out in the world and you see a little boy, 3 or 4 years old, something happens, he gets upset, he starts crying. One of the most common things we'll see parents come with is, stop crying. Yep. You're fine, right? And when you imagine that energy coming at a totally tender young nervous system, and you can actually witness it, when someone tells us to stop feeling, the first thing we do is we stop breathing, and our whole body tightens up. We actually tighten to stop the feeling. And the thing is, that acutely relaxes, but we keep holding on to it. So the way we don't feel an emotion is we hold on to it, and it gets packed into our tissues, and it takes energy to hold, right? I run guys through this experiment. Like right now, it's like, okay, tense up your whole body, like your biceps. Yep, you can feel it, right? You don't really have to move much, but you're tensing it. It's like, oh yeah, that's okay. And then if I'm like, now keep holding it. We're going to do this for 4 or 5 minutes. That's what happens with our emotional content. So this fuel, this life force that we need, particularly as we age as men, it's being used to hold this old emotional content. And it's not available for us to tackle the things we want to tackle in life, to move towards the things we want to move. And so shadow work, deep emotional work, plant medicine work, these are all avenues, breath work, to start to release some of this held stuff in our body that we don't even always need to know why it's there. It's just like we're doing some piece of work, and whoa, this huge wave of grief comes, right? Yeah. Or this huge type of inner panic. And there's ways we can kind of process that, and we get to release that from our tissues. It takes time, but that metabolic resource comes back. Our body actually relaxes, right? Our fascia loosen up. We breathe more deeply. And lo and behold, we become more present, and it's easier for us to just be here in the moment and then move towards what we want.
I love what you're saying. You're right on point. Yeah, I've done breath work, the very first time, and all of a sudden it's like I'm crying, and I feel like so much, weight lifted off of me just through breathing and being present in the moment and just letting go. I imagine you guys are getting some massive healing. You talk about relationships and men's mental health. You talked about like sexless marriages and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. What's kind of driving men's thought process? I know that there's a lot of issues in marriages, and men don't deal with them properly or the way their spouse wants them to.
There's why I love working in this area is it's like a bunch of things all come together in terms of fueling that. So I primarily work with hetero couples just because that's the world I know, right? I'm married to a woman, so I know the issues with that, let's just say. And first off, there's cultural stuff. So this is where I talk about, I didn't come up with this term, but we've heard about the man box, right? This idea that part of what's so challenging for us men is there's this checklist of things we're expected to behave and be like, and if we don't, we're not considered a man. And first and foremost on that is often don't feel, right? Feelings are weak. Don't ever cry. Don't show emotion. Don't be vulnerable. Be tough, right? Be a tough guy. Pick yourself up from the bootstraps. Don't be a victim. Go. And, obviously there's some positive qualities in there. I'm not here to deny all that, but this is what gets hammered into men and boys, particularly from a young age. Like I said, that example of stop crying, when we really think about what that is teaching a young boy, it's what you're feeling in your body is to be ignored. Override it with your head, right? Then we get into schooling. And yeah, there are differences between boys and girls. Boys tend to have a lot of kinetic energy. We need to move our bodies a lot. We get into modern schooling. What are we hearing? Sit still. Override your body with your head, right? We get up to kind of our teenage years. We're in that kind of adolescent competition. Everyone's comparing, puberty kind of thing. Whatever's happening inside of you, do not share it out there because it can become ammo. Best case, you'll just be kind of made fun of. Worst case, you're actively going to be bullied. And then it kind of just continues on up, right? We get out into the workforce. Oh yeah, you work 80 hours a week. Great. Good for you. You're a hard worker. Awesome job. We're taught to just push our bodies, ignore what's happening inside. It's definitely changing, but tends to be that the most dangerous and physically demanding jobs in the world are held by men. Toxic chemicals, long hours, dangerous environments. Again, ignore your body. Just keep pushing. Point of all this is from a young age, we're taught, ignore your body. Ignore your body. Operate from here. That tends to work for a little while, but then, we start to grow up. And the thing about ignoring our body is emotions always start as sensations in our bodies. So if we're not connected to our bodies, we're not connected to our emotions. And what starts to happen is life stress hits us as men. Nobody's taught us what we're feeling on the inside, let alone what do we do about it. And we can't certainly talk about it. So we hold it inside. And when the intensity gets too much, what most men do is we turn to something to relieve ourselves of that tension. Alcohol, weed, TV, food, masturbation, ejaculation, sex, overworking, you name it. We will do anything to eject ourselves from those uncomfortable feelings, which provides temporary relief, but never gets to the what's actually happening underneath. So that's all happening, that us men are accumulating stress that we don't know how to communicate. So then we get into these relationships and our partners want to know what's happening inside of us. But often we can't even answer that question. When I first started getting into this work, someone would ask me, how are you feeling? I'd be like, what do you mean? I'm fine.
I feel great.
Yeah, it's just like this default kind of like a bit of a numbness, couldn't really describe my inner world at all, which obviously doesn't give me much power then to deal with it. Because if I can't name it, I can't work with it. And that would get, I've been married now for 7 years, and even early in my marriage, that would be a huge thing for my wife. She's like, I can't feel you. And if I can't feel you, I don't trust you. And so she would get very uncomfortable. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, what are you feeling? What are you wanting? What's your plan? And then she would have to amp up her energy and start poking me until I had some kind of reaction, and then she could feel me.
Yeah.
And we did that dance many, many times, and it caused a lot of pain for us. So there's all the emotional stuff happening to men. Then there's also just the changing nature, particularly in hetero relationships, of what it means to be in a relationship, right? It used to be, for the majority of human existence, as a man, you just kind of had to provide. Like, if you were bringing home a certain level of sustenance, that you did enough. That all radically started to change in the 50s, right? Women started to have the women's lib movement. Birth control came out. They were liberated from having to just be mothers. They could actually have their own inner identity and wants and desires and work in the world. And so we saw that in the 50s, 60s, 70s, women coming out of the household into the world. They could actually, in a sense, develop their own inner masculine. This is what I want. I'm moving towards it. I'm working towards it. I don't need to rely on anyone else. And that's a positive thing. Let me be super clear about that. That's great. We want more freedom for more people. Simultaneously, and we're a little more behind, I would say, as men, we're getting to now have an inner world, right? So part of what's happening here is, oh, wait, no, we are allowed to feel as men, right? We are allowed to have an inner world and have emotional experiences and to be in touch with ourselves. That too is great. The problem is we talk about this in terms of this term polarity, right? Which is just, okay, how does attraction work? And the simplest definition, right? It's like a magnet. You have a positive side, you have a negative side. As long as they're different, they get pulled towards each other. There's an actual erotic energy running between. If they're not different, worst or best case scenario is they're just neutral. It's just like, worst case scenario is they actually actively repel each other. It's like, ugh. And so what's happened for a lot of guys is polarity is reversed in relationships these days. More and more women are graduating with great degrees and get these kick-ass jobs and really on their game in the world. And a lot of men I'm working with are a little more lost. Of like, I don't know what to do. I was taught I needed to have, needed to be able to feel. So I've been like feeling myself and I'm not totally set in my career, or I'm struggling with this thing. And that starts to create some friction in relationships because the polarity's reversed, right? Often the woman is doing more driving in her life than the man. And so there's like a lack of attraction there for some people. Not everyone, but some. So that's happening, which is a big one. And then, us men in particular are trying to learn, what does it mean to be an active leading man in a relationship now? That is not the old domineering women are an object mentality. Mm-hmm. But that is also not the, oh my God, happy wife, happy life, please her to appease her, nice guy thing. That also doesn't work. Those guys are in just as much pain. And again, oftentimes their partners end up and not feeling super attracted to them. Mm-hmm. So there's this work of, okay, how do I show up as a man in my relationship, in my power, in my desire, and in my sensitivity in a way that, okay, so it's not that we have to play these roles anymore of man does all this, woman does all this. It's we're liberated from all that. So what do we want to choose? What kind of energy are we going to choose to bring forward to our partner that's most conducive to attraction, to love, to trust? And these are actual attributes that a lot of us guys need to practice cultivating, what we would call kind of our inner masculine, which is not how tough we are. It's not how much money we make. It's not how rock hard our abs are. It's way simpler than that in the sense of it's how deep is our presence. Mm-hmm. Literally, how deeply present and still can we get in the moment and really lead by drawing our partners into what's happening right now. That's tough for a lot of us guys because most of us guys are up here in our head having 40 thoughts a second, not actually present with what's happening right now. So all the emotional work, all the embodiment work, it's about getting us guys more present so we can lead and create the type of relationships we actually want. One last, shaker of the salt here, I'll say is, like I said, most of us have just never had modeled for us healthy, passionate relationships, right? So many guys I work with, I can't even tell you how many guys I work with are like, yeah, I never saw my parents kiss, or I never saw my parents fight, or all they did was fight, or it just felt like they were roommates. We just never had modeled for us what a sustained love partnership looks like, where partners like each other, they know how to fight well with each other, and they're still attracted to each other. And when we haven't had that modeled for us, lo and behold, we don't know what to look for. We don't know how to create it. So all this kind of swirls together that one of the reasons, again, I focus on dating and relationships is, there still tends to be a bit of a stigma. Guys tend to be pretty resistant to getting help, to doing inner work. But one of the only things I found that will get a man's ass off the couch to get help and change his life is when an intimate relationship isn't working, whether he can't get one or his is falling apart or it fell apart. That's often the kind of wake up call for a man. That's like, okay, I need to do something different here. And it's not that there's anything wrong with me. I've literally just never been taught how to do it. So just like any other skill, I'm going to go out and learn how to do this from people who have had some success.
It seems like most guys, it's not until something falls apart that they are like, okay, I need to get in shape. I need to check my mental health. Maybe I should get a better career. And we go down all these paths that we should have been doing all along. Why do you think guys are so resistant?
For me, again, I didn't know what else was possible. And I think for a lot of men, they don't know. They do have this idea that, again, we either have to be kind of the domineering jerk or the pushover nice guy. And one of the things I see transform men the fastest, we're in a group, and when a man is able to bring forward his anger, his rage, his frustration, and yet he still feels completely safe to be around. Completely safe. And then on the other pole, when a man brings forward his grief, his heartbreak, his inner pain, yet he still feels totally solid. He's not collapsed. He's just with it. These are two examples I see all the time. When a man experiences another man in one of those energy states, it transforms their nervous system of, oh shit, nobody taught me that this was an option. I'm allowed to feel and I don't have to collapse and be a victim. And I'm allowed to feel my rage and I don't have to posture and be this kind of aggressive jerk that many men often had fathers, who just rage with aggression. As we see something else is possible, we're like, oh, that actually looks a lot easier, right? I'm still doing this work. It still catches me that, something will come up and I'll start to, I don't want to feel that. Like, no, I don't want to kind of stuff it. Maybe it might be a week, might be 3 months still. And eventually then I'm in groups. I have my support networks. I'll get to that thing. I'll emotionally go towards it. I'll be present with it. The whole thing will maybe take 3 to 5 minutes max. I mean, I shit you not, like 3 to 5 minutes max. On the other side of it, I'll be like, oh my God, I did it again. I just spent months avoiding that feeling, using all that energy, and it actually only took 3 or 5 minutes. Turns out it's much easier as we learn to process and be with this stuff, and our lives get easier. But we just don't have models for this of men in the world, right? Here in the States in particular, we're given kind of the lone cowboy, the rugged individual, the pick yourself up by the bootstraps, just my way of the highway guy, the nice guy, and often the stoic, don't just feel anything. And when those are our only models, we're like, well, what's the point in getting help? I saw nothing ever helped my dad. He got angry all the time and his life didn't change, or, all these countless examples. And then there's just that stigma from the man box that if you go get particularly like therapy or something, it's because you're broken and there's something wrong with you, which is just, it's such utter horseshit. Because when you think about it, it's like, well, do we only go to the gym when we've acutely injured ourselves? No, we go to the gym to keep ourselves fit and to grow and strengthen ourselves, right? It's like a preventative thing. Therapy, counseling, these things are just the same. We go to these kind of specialists to work out our emotional body and our mental body. Doesn't mean you're broken, doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It's just good hygiene. And turns out when you do this stuff, your body becomes more relaxed, your presence deepens, people around you trust you more, quality of your relationships go up. I've seen this time and time again, because like I said, one of my main programs just focuses on presence and relationships. But guess what? You start doing that, guys will often get raises. They'll get new job opportunities. Because lo and behold, people want to be around people whose nervous systems feel good, who are relaxed, who aren't wound up, who aren't stressed.
So what have you seen? I know for me, like I went and did ayahuasca. When I came home, I was completely changed from that week experience. And coming home to my wife, we had been fighting and I needed help. I come back from this and I'm like, okay, I'm fixed. I'm changed. I'm a better person now. She wasn't buying it for a while. She had to actually go down there and experience this herself to understand what I went through. Most guys and guys in general who do this work, like, how do they just have to model their behavior for their spouse or partner to understand, like, oh, okay, this guy is actually making changes, or do they get pushback? How does it?
Sure. Yeah. Well, a lot of times, particularly if you're in a long-term relationship, there's an accumulation of resentments, frustrations, and broken trust. So that has to be mended, right? It's not like an instant fix. As I say, I've been talking about this idea of rupture and repair. Trust and love, in my view, real trust and real love, they are created through rupture and repair. We come into some kind of conflict or dissonance, and then we find a way back to connection. And every time we do that, it's like we're adding another stitch to a quilt that ties us together. So actually, the more we do it, the stronger our bond gets. And the more we do it, the less we fear the conflict, right? Because we're like, oh, we know how to navigate this as a couple. We might need a counselor, we might need help, we might need our friends, whatever, but we don't have to avoid it. And so it takes time. And oftentimes for the feminine, for women, they have been let down by men often. Men who just dropped the ball, didn't show up, lost consciousness, overreacted, whatever it is. And so it's like every time they open their heart, it ends up being dropped. Open their heart, ends up being dropped. Over time, they're like, I ain't fucking opening this heart.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if I do this, you better not drop it. So it's a vulnerable thing. And so then it takes time to, oh, wait, okay. Ooh, you stayed with me on that one. Or maybe that was a little rocky, but we found a way through it. And that does take time. One of my mentors told me, you know, you're changing when you start having different reactions to the same situations. Mm-hmm. So me and my wife would get into that same dance in our relationship. And in fact, we wouldn't get into it because I became attuned to start to feel, ooh, we haven't connected. Mm-hmm. I haven't actually come towards her and opened in some capacity and gone deep with her. So either I can just do what I've done in the past and just ignore this, mm-hmm. and there's going to be a blow up, or I can be proactive here and actually lead something in our relationship, and then boom, we reconnect. And so that, for me, that was a big part of being able to notice that. And tying it back to the shadow work, it's part of what's so great about that work is these processes that run, these reactivities, this reaction we have inside of us. You know, another way to think about shadow work that I do it with guys is it's like the bullet time from the Matrix, you know, when things just super slow down.
Yeah.
We get to slow down our process in ways we can't do in the default world and become really aware of, oh, before I explode or walk out of the room, way before that, I notice my shoulders actually tighten up. Mm-hmm. I cave forward a little bit to protect myself. And so as we develop our awareness of what's happening inside of us, lo and behold, we have increased our capacity to respond to the moment consciously rather than unconsciously react. And so as we get to know our wounding, the patterns of our nervous system of how we try to protect ourselves, we can bring that into relationship, and we can start to lead it in different ways and talk to our partners about it in very proactive ways. And, you know, just to wrap this one up, what you did there is like Jedi level. It's like telling my guys, like, the retreat, the workshop, the ceremony, that is the easy part. And they're like, no, that was the hardest thing I ever did. I'm like, no, that's the easy part. The hard part is what happens Monday morning when you get home. Mm-hmm. And the container's gone, the medicine's gone, the facilitation's gone, and you're just back in your life. And in fact, you're back in a life that was not on retreat with you. Mm-hmm. They didn't have that experience. Mm-hmm. I heard this anecdote, which kind of blew my mind as an example of this. I think it was from the biography of the guy who ended up assassinating Osama bin Laden, right? Like, national hero, right?
Yeah.
He gets home, opens the door. First thing his wife does, hands him the trash bag. Yeah. Right. This is what's happening here right now. I've been holding down the fort while you've been gone. Take out the trash, right? There's like just a level of reality there that I wasn't on that experience, you know, and that just always really like stood with me. And I have to do a lot of work with guys on retreat to prepare them for integration coming back home. And particularly if they're in partnership, to really be aware of your partner wasn't on the retreat, right? And the work here is integrating that temporary state you experienced into a permanent trait. And that's where structure, practice, routine, all these things come important of, okay, I had this huge heart-opening experience and your heart will close again. It's just how life works. It will close again. That thing you thought you figured out, there's going to be a moment where you're like, fuck, I didn't figure it out. I'm right back where I started. You're not right back where you started, but there's just an awareness of, oh, this is where the work is. Now I have to consciously bring that thing in. And relationships are so great because they're really, in my mind, the ultimate dojo for that, right? If we're with a great partner, they can see through our bullshit. They can feel our nervous systems, and they're going to let us know where we're at, if we're dissonant, if we're not in integrity, but it's the place where we get to practice the most and really transform these patterns.
Yeah. And I think probably in your groups, these guys are meeting other guys and they're building these bonds and this trust. And those are opportunities for you to have these conversations with other guys once you leave the retreat. I'm sure they all stay in contact. I know that's been big for me to be able to talk to other guys who have experienced this stuff, and communication guys talk to each other. Like, it's huge. It really does help.
Life-changing.
Man, so I have a 5-year-old son, and he's growing up, and I try not to yell at him. I discipline him, within reason and stuff like that. But how do you protect your sons, especially growing up in this world and like giving them the tools that they need? Do you have any experience with helping guys with that?
Yeah, I have a almost 5-year-old daughter and brand new son.
Right.
So son energy is definitely up, but obviously, thank you. Working with men so much, I literally see the, particularly in shadow work, one of the things that gets uncovered so fast is how often the issues we're carrying as men, it's not even just ours. It's like, oh shit, I can feel how dad had this. I can feel how grandpa had this. And it goes back in our lineage. And so the best prescription I have for fathers that want to do something different for their boys or their girls is you keep doing your work. Mm-hmm. You relentlessly commit to uncovering every bit in your nervous system of what you were taught, what patterning you had, what you received from your culture, and doing a different thing with your life. And what I see is that radiates out to the children when they can actually feel the nervous system of their dad transforming, and it starts to model that other way. In a lot of ways, as we learn to embrace our emotions in a sense, which again doesn't mean we're hyper reactive to them or we collapse or get overwhelmed by them. It means we intelligently know as men how to process them. So modeling for our kids like, wow, right, seems like you're really mad right now. You're really angry right now. Why don't we do something healthy with that? I'm going to get a wiffle bat and we got some pillows. It's not okay for you to hit other people or hurt other people or hit the environment, but you can do this right now. That's safe. You can stomp your feet. And we often have to model this stuff for our kids. But, I've become increasingly passionate about, in a lot of ways, our primary job as parents is to teach our kids about their inner world. Mm-hmm. So like I said, for me, if someone asked me, what am I feeling? I was like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're doing. I feel fine. How we learn what's happening in our inner nervous system is by a steady, calm, regulated nervous system, ideally a parent, co-parent, caregiver, who in the moment sees our nervous system is overwhelmed as a kid, drops down to our level, we're steady in it, and we help them figure out what they're feeling. Hey, what's going on for you right now? Like, see, you're stomping your feet. Are you mad? You're mad you can't have another cookie, huh? You're really mad. You want that cookie. And what you'll start to see is the connections start to go off in the kid where they're like, oh, wait, yeah, this overwhelming feeling I'm having in my body right now. That's what that is. I'm angry. I want that and I can't have it. So by us mirroring it back to our children a little bit, that's how they learn what their inner experience is. And then if we're doing that from a place of a regulated nervous system, right? We're calm. We're not overreacting hard as a parent, right? Nothing's going to trigger you quite like a kid other than an intimate partner. But as our nervous system stays relaxed in that, makes it okay for them to have whatever feeling they're having. Like it's totally okay as long as they're not hurting anyone or the environment, pointing it outwards. It's totally okay. And then we're with them in it. We're reflecting them to it and we're breathing. What you're going to see is that kid co-regulates. They come right back down, right? Might involve some touch, might involve some eye contact. Us co-regulating our children, lo and behold, what does that do? It gives them the roadmap for what to do inside themselves. I've been through this. Deep breath. I can start to regulate myself in a way. teaching your children how to regulate their emotional selves, that's one of the biggest gifts I think there is. And then you're simultaneously doing your own work, totally transformative, because that's what we should be teaching our children, but we don't. Instead, we just stick them in front of a screen and they end up going nuts. Like culturally, kids are going nuts because nobody is actually slowing down and bringing them into their bodies and into their nervous systems to help them process that. But if you bring a child forward who knows how to be present to their emotional selves, knows how to process it, doesn't have to feel shame around it, they are going to be like crushing it in life. Because so much of life these days is just about our capacity to self-regulate. Like, how can I stay focused on something? How can I study for a test? How can I do the work I need to do? How can I get my ass to the gym? That's all self-regulation. So that's the skill, I'm certainly trying to give my kids. And then particularly for boys, modeling for them that, ain't no shame in crying or being afraid. In fact, it's totally healthy and normal, and it's okay to ask for help.
Right on, man. So if there's guys out there right now who are on the fence, they need help. We all need help. What kind of encouragement will you give somebody who's on the fence? They know they need help. They just haven't pulled the trigger or don't want to pull the trigger. Do you got any guidance? Somebody who's resistant to this change, even though they know, buddy, like we all need the work. You know?
I mean, kind of going back to the pain thing, what I tell guys is, so oftentimes men are already getting some kind of signal from their environment, from their body, from their relationships, that something isn't working, it's not sustainable. And so you kind of have two choices. You can either ignore that signal until the world, your partner, your body, whatever, have to turn up the volume so high that you will have no choice but to take a different action, right? I've worked with guys who are, corporate CEOs, push themselves for 20 years. One day they just can't get out of bed. They're in bed for 3 months. They're just totally burnt out and their body's like, nope, you're done. You cannot do this to me anymore. Or, a partner leaves. So all these different things I was talking about. So you can either wait for the signal to get so big, it's going to just bludgeon you with something that will force you to change. Or you can really just say, okay, I can feel there's something here that's not quite right. And I'm going to be proactive. I'm going to run an experiment to try something else. It's all you're doing. And then, whether it's a men's group, whether it's counseling, whether it's plant medicine, you go and do it and you see what happens in my nervous system after. Do I feel different? Do I feel more alive, more relaxed, more free, more love, whatever that might be. And the thing I tell guys about stepping onto this path is it's not that life's going to get easier, but it will get better. And particularly why I focus on men's groups and male relationships so much is this idea that the more connected we are, the more resilient we become. A lot of men don't have many connections, and particularly male connections. And so their intimate relationship, if we imagine kind of subjectively, if they only have one connection in their life, the status of that relationship determines the status of, am I doing well or not? So if there's conflict or I'm not doing well in my partnership, my life feels awful. As we increase our system and we have more relationships, one of them might not be going well, but hey, I have 10 others that are going great right now. So relatively, it takes up less space in my nervous system. I'm part of a bigger system. And so life doesn't necessarily get easier, but it does get better. And what I see is men become more resilient. One of my friends told me this phrase I love: community is immunity. Don't care how tough you think you are as a man, there's gonna be a day, every man can hear this, there is going to be a day your body will fail you. You will not be able to just push through. That is the day you're gonna fall to the level of systems you have around you, community and support. Literally, who and what is gonna catch you? And so you can be proactive building that now. And then when adverse life events come, what I see is guys bounce back so much faster. It's not that they magically fix all their problems, but something hard happens to them. Most of us guys don't know what to do with that. So we ignore it or push. Just having something like a men's group, a couple of male connections like you were talking about, having somewhere to bring our emotional experience is often life-changing in itself. So instead of carrying this resentment about my boss for weeks or months at a time, I call up a buddy and I go on maybe a 4-minute conscious rant. All that charge is relaxed in my nervous system, probably for a good day or two, maybe a week. Yeah. And then I might have to do it again, but there's actually space in my body. So I would say, if you have a sense that you're not getting quite what you want, or life feels like a lot of burden, or you feel alone, or you feel stressed or overworked, it's time to try something different and get some kind of help and step on this path.
Right on. Am I missing anything? I'm sure there's lots more we can cover, but I don't want to take up all of your time.
Sounds pretty awesome to me. What I tell men is, who's more afraid?
Yeah.
The guy that is deathly afraid of his emotions and won't touch them with a 10-foot pole, pretends to be tough, have all this bravado, or the man who's willing to just step into it and face it head on. This is what I'm feeling. Overwhelmed by it, not going to be posturing around it. That, to me, that's the new warrior. It's men who are just as fearless about facing their inner world as they are about the outer world.
Jason, I couldn't agree more. If people want to get a hold of you, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, best way to stay up informed with me and my podcast and all my work and events is just go to my website, which is evolutionary.men. So not .com, but .men. And there's a contact form on there if you want to write me. I love helping guys find groups or start groups, anything like that. There's all the programs I run. There's tons of podcasts and stuff I've done. So if this is lit up any interest, definitely check it out.
I sure appreciate you talking about this subject. So many men need community and help, and you're doing God's. So I appreciate you, and thank you so much for joining me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tim.